Today, we're diving into two of the most terrifying cave descents ever recorded. One of them was so dangerous that an explorer lost his grip during the descent and plummeted deep into the darkness, suffering a devastating spinal injury. Stay tuned to find out what went wrong, and as always, viewer discretion is advised. Bear Hollow Rift wasn't your average cave. This place was brutal. Imagine squeezing through tunnels so tight they crush your ribs, climbing down bottomless pits, and scaling slick vertical walls. That's what 8 experienced cavers, including Andy Zellner, Jim Smith, Bill Steele, and Jay Jordan, signed up for on November 25, 2006. They thought they were ready. They were wrong. After fighting their way down 3 massive drops and through tunnels that scraped skin off their bones, the team reached the bottom completely drained. Every muscle screamed in protest, but Jordan had it even tougher. His bulky wetsuit and oversized pack turned every move into a struggle. The others waited patiently each time he fell behind. In this cave, you couldn't rush things. One wrong move could be your last. At the bottom of the cave, the team faced a tough choice. 4 members decided to begin the exhausting climb back to daylight, their bodies already pushed to the limit. They turned to Jordan. "Come with us," they urged. But Jordan shook his head. That single decision would soon become his biggest regret. Later, hoping to beat the worst of the fatigue, Jordan set out alone ahead of the remaining 3 cavers. Every movement was agony as he dragged himself through the dripping, claustrophobic tunnels, his energy fading fast. When Zellner, Smith, and Steele finally followed his path, they discovered their worst nightmare come true. There, at the most dangerous spot imaginable, the 45-foot vertical pit, Jordan was completely trapped. He'd somehow managed to climb the rope, but now hung helpless at the top, his body wedged against the unforgiving rock. The narrow tunnel beyond might as well have been miles away. He couldn't move forward, couldn't go back, and with every passing second, his situation grew more desperate. The real issue was something called the rock horn, a sharp, unforgiving chunk of stone that jutted out near the top of the pit like a barrier. It was fixed in place, immovable, and it made the already narrow crawlway above nearly impossible to enter. Jordan had done the hard part. He'd climbed the full 45-foot rope, soaked and exhausted. But now, just a few feet from safety, he found himself completely stuck. The tight space, already difficult to navigate, was made worse by his wetsuit and gear. He tried everything, twisting, turning, pulling, but nothing worked. He was wedged in, completely trapped. Below, Zellner, Smith, and Steele watched, their hearts sinking as they realized how bad the situation was. They offered suggestions, called out tips, tried to help guide him through, but nothing made a difference. The setup he was using, a climbing system called the rope walker, just wasn't designed for this kind of tight maneuvering. It held him in place too rigidly, preventing him from getting the flexibility he needed to pull himself over the lip and into the passage. And the more he struggled, the more drained he became. For Jordan, switching to the Texas system didn't make a difference. The rock horn still blocked his upper body, and he was simply too exhausted to make the moves he needed. The only option left was to get rid of the obstacle. He stood on the etrier, stretching his body as far as he could, fighting to push past the rock. But it wouldn't budge. Minutes dragged into hours. His strength was fading fast. His breathing turned shallow, his arms trembled, and his legs burned from holding himself in place. And then, he just couldn't do it anymore. His grip slipped. His body gave out, and he slid back down the 45-foot shaft. It wasn't a free fall, but it was the fall of someone who had nothing left to give. When he hit the bottom, he didn't move. The others rushed to him, afraid of what they'd find. Thankfully, he wasn't hurt, but he was done. His arms lay limp, his chest rose and fell with deep, tired breaths. The 3 rescuers quickly made a decision. They turned and climbed out of the cave, pushing through the same brutal crawls and pit climbs that had nearly broken Jordan. They had to get supplies, warm clothes, food, and water. Jordan sat alone in the darkness, shivering, his body worn down from cold, hunger, and pure exhaustion. Hours passed like days. When Smith and Steele finally made it back to him, they brought dry clothes, a warm jacket, and something to eat. By 4:15 in the morning, rescue teams were called in. These weren't ordinary first responders. They were trained cave rescuers, equipped with specialized tools, hammer drills, bolt kits, rock shavers, everything needed to work in the tightest, most dangerous spots underground. At 8:50 a.m., they entered the cave and began the long descent into the narrow, winding passages. Their goal was to reach Jordan and get him out safely. By the time they arrived, he'd been trapped for over 20 hours. He wasn't bleeding, he hadn't broken any bones. But you could see the toll it had taken. His eyes were hollow, his body barely moving, his energy gone. There was no other choice. The rescuers got to work, drilling into the rock horn that had trapped Jordan for so long. Each hit of the hammer echoed through the cave, deep and powerful, like distant thunder rolling through the earth. Jordan could only watch, his body shivering uncontrollably from the cold, his mind barely holding on. He had never felt this powerless in his life. To give him a better chance of escaping, the team set a new anchor bolt at a better angle, hoping it would make the transition easier. Then finally, the last pieces of rock gave way, cracking and breaking like the final bars of a prison cell. It was time. Jordan moved for the first time in hours. His hands gripped the rope, shaking violently. His legs felt numb, refusing to respond. And then, he was out. The team grabbed him, catching him as he collapsed onto the cave floor. He was free, but barely holding on. The climb to the surface was a blur. Jordan didn't have the strength to do it on his own, but the rescuers stayed by his side the entire way. His mind drifted, fading in and out, his body running purely on survival instinct. Then, at last, he saw it, the mouth of the cave. And when the cold morning air hit his face, it felt unreal. After 24 grueling hours trapped in the dark, Jordan was finally free. High in Mexico's Oaxaca mountains, at 2,700 meters above sea level, the gaping mouth of Cueva Chev beckons only the bravest explorers. This isn't your average hole in the ground. It's one of Earth's deepest cave systems, a vertical labyrinth that has challenged American caving teams for decades. The air at Chev's entrance is thinner than Denver's, making every physical effort twice as exhausting. In February 1991, 14 elite cavers assembled at base camp, their sights set on an audacious goal: to dive past the cave's known limits. But first came the grueling prep work, carefully rigging 35 vertical drops between the surface and Camp 2, a temporary home 850 meters down. That's deeper than 2 Empire State Buildings stacked underground. This wasn't simple rappelling. To protect their ropes from sharp limestone walls, they used a rebelay system. Imagine climbing down a series of suspended rope segments, having to stop every few meters to switch your gear. One wrong move mid-transfer, and you're falling into darkness. On February 25th, the first team of 6 began their descent. 7 to 10 hours of squeezing through cracks, rappelling into voids, and navigating waterfalls, all while hauling gear. Over subsequent days, teams played underground relay, shuttling supplies deeper into Chev's mysterious depths. Each trip was a ballet of skill and endurance, where concentration meant the difference between discovery and disaster. On March 1st, the team returned. Peter Bostad, Peter Haberland, and 2 others. James Brown, still nursing a hurt shoulder, and Chris Jorger, who'd been feeling under the weather. They entered in shifts an hour apart to avoid traffic jams in the narrow tunnels. This staggered entry technique is called leapfrogging, just like the playground game. Jorger and Haberland made good progress. By mid-afternoon, they hit Sacknoom's Well, a series of slippery vertical drops. Here, Jorger fumbled his rappel rack, the crucial device that controls your descent speed, and had to borrow Haberland's to recover it. At the time, it seemed like just a small mistake. By evening, they'd left the wet sections behind, entering dry chambers near Camp 2. At flag junctions, the identical-looking rock walls confused them briefly before they found their way. The last challenge? East Gorge, a tight canyon with a tricky two-part drop. Haberlin explained. First, a 10-meter slide down loose rocks, then a heart-stopping 23-meter freefall. The Rebele, a mid-rope anchor point, was vital here. Without it, the rope would rub against sharp rocks and quickly fray. One weak spot could mean disaster. Haberland went first, carefully working through the tricky rope setup. The safety anchor was awkwardly placed, way too low, so he had to use his foot ascender to get enough slack to unhook safely. Once down, he yelled up, "All clear." Then, Jorger's warning echoed down. Haberland froze, waiting to hear "off rope." What came instead made his stomach drop. A whooshing sound, then a bone-chilling thud. Silence. Jorger. Jorger. No answer. Hands shaking, Haberland climbed over his protective boulder and looked down. There was Jorger, completely still in a shallow puddle. His right leg bent all wrong, foot twisted sideways, helmet knocked back but still on his head, arms stretched out like he'd tried to catch himself. Heavy backpack pinning him face down. The water wasn't even deep, maybe 3 inches, but it was enough to drown in if you couldn't move. Haberland's hands shook as he rushed forward. Gently, he turned Jorger's head to keep his face above the shallow water. Knowing spinal injuries could be deadly, he didn't dare move him more. The cave's silence was deafening. No breathing, no movement. No time to check for a pulse. Pure instinct took over. Run. Get help. Now. Whistle shrieking, he flew through passages that had taken hours to navigate, reaching Camp 2 in just 15 minutes. Boston and Brown jumped up at the alarm. They didn't need words to understand. Grabbing medical supplies and warm gear, they raced back. Jorger hadn't moved. A thin line of blood ran from his nose against ghostly pale skin. Bosted's fingers searched for a pulse. Nothing. The cave's chill bit deeper as they lifted Jorger from the water, wrapping him in a sleeping bag on a rocky shelf. They tried CPR, but each artificial breath just made wet, hollow sounds. After 20 minutes, his face began swelling unnaturally. A flashlight check showed no pupil response. The terrible truth was undeniable. Their friend was gone. The team sat for hours in their headlamp circles. The cave's playful mystery now feeling cold and cruel. After painful discussions, they made the call to bury Jorger right there in Chev's depths. In a quiet chamber above the fatal drop, his father and friends traveled from the States to say goodbye underground. But grief doesn't follow neat plans. Months passed. The family changed their minds. A special recovery team went back nearly a year later, finally bringing Jorger home. The accident investigation revealed haunting details. Jorger's rappel rack still dangled 2 meters below the Rebele anchor. His safety carabiner hung open like a broken promise. The cave kept its secrets, but the equipment told its own story. Haberlin's reconstruction revealed a terrifying flaw. An unweighted rappel rack could twist just right to pop open the carabiner's gate. The moment Jorger leaned into it, instant freefall. No warning, no time to scream. Modern cavers now use double-lock carabiners after this accident. 2 separate mechanisms to prevent accidental openings. The tragedy sparked urgent safety reforms. Rappel devices must now use unopenable quick links or dual carabiners. Packs should hang below climbers, not weigh down their backs. The Rebele setup was clearly flawed. Too difficult to navigate safely. But here's the hard truth. Disasters never happen for just one reason. It's always a domino effect. A badly placed anchor here, a distracted moment there, an unlocked carabiner. In Chev's depths, all these small mistakes added up to the unthinkable. Yet cavers still returned to Cheve, pulled by its siren call of undiscovered passages. It remains a place of breathtaking wonder and deadly consequence. Where one wrong move can change everything, the cave doesn't forgive, it doesn't forget, and it's always waiting.